Riverbend Talent on the Big Z, brought to you by the Halpin Music Company and by Mr. Matt Van Vorst, the insurance force of the Riverbend. Because, G-Force is retiring, so we got Matt Van G-Force now
Uh,
from Macias Insurance and German Insurance if you're looking for his building in Jerseyville.
yeah, so there you go. Go to Halpin Music, find a nice instrument, and then call Mr. Mad Van Vorst. Have him insure that instrument for you. And that'll keep us on the air for, another 10 years doing this tomfoolery, celebration and jackassery on a weekly basis.
Hmm.
So here we're always here telling you what's happening with our local community, the arts, and the music scene. And every week we have a guest. We have coming back to the show, Mr. Andy Coco. Greetings and salutations, my friend.
Hi. Good afternoon or evening, I should say. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
I haven't seen you for a while. It's nice to see
Yeah,
your lovely face.
thank you very much.
I, I
Thanks.
I've been thinking of you. I don't know if you'll even remember this, but this off topic, but I do that a lot. I've recently seen 48 Hours. And the line, we ain't brothers, we ain't partners, and we ain't friends. I think of you every time I hear that because I think that was one of the earliest things I said to you when we met.
Oh my gosh.
And I meant it in the most endearing terms that, hey, we ain't brothers, partners, or friends, but let's become that. Because
Nice.
I just kind of showed up at KDHX, and that was many moon ago. That was back 2013, that was quite a while back when I met you. So uh, always
So
think of you when I hear that line.
Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy, 48 Hours, that's what you're referring to. Yeah,
Oh
this is
yeah.
a
Yes,
it's a
sir. Yeah, yeah. To all those
yeah.
people in radio land who have no idea what I'm talking
Well,
about.
it's a great buddy movie, and so here we were, I don't know, you came in kind of like a storm. I remember you, having a real well-defined way you were planning to participate, and that's what I think was my favorite thing about different people that I worked with at KDHX over the years, where they have the clearer your vision or your goal, the better. It's easier to deal with that, like,
Oh
and
yeah.
you had, I know exactly what Pigpen is up to, man. That's what's up. And so it was easy to, be a hands-off producer. That's the deal there was I was never a director of production despite the title. It was more of a production manager where I got to, help people get their thing done.
Yeah.
That was the beauty of that platform for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, and another one of my earliest memories is when after I did some production over there and we got to know each other and was discussing a show, I turned in a demo to you and you came back and said, you can't do this every week. It's too much. And you were right. I had spent way
Yeah.
too much time on that demo to pump out that kind of material every week. But man, it was fun trying. It's all yeah, you gotta have a goal, right?
Well, if you had a team of 10 people and a limitless budget, then and nothing else to do in the daytime,
Yeah.
but you were doing some really, really cool. I mean, Dr. Demento comes to mind. Is that really you? Were you into that in a bit in the
I
day or?
absolutely a
Yeah, yeah,
Demento
radio's
fan.
magic. Yeah,
Yeah,
radio magic, I love it.
yeah, absolutely.
The
See,
art, the art of radio.
the magic of the movies? No, it's the magic of the radio. Marconi.
Mhm.
Anyway,
So much, but yeah, yeah. There's so much more you can do with it. There's so much more that the mind can do when you're talking directly to it too. The idea of not having anything, all this distraction and visual imagery and stuff to be able to talk right into somebody's brain to some degree, like right in the hole, right in the ear hole. And so as to be as creative as you were with that, that's hard to sustain, but it was really, really neat to,
Right.
I remember liking it. I was like, oh boy, that'd be great. But I'm that, ba-
Uh,
I'm that practical dude.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I found out very quickly that you were correct to put that many hours of production in every week when you have the rest of life spinning around you is
Yeah.
it's fun, but hard to keep up with sometimes.
I
Okay.
call it, I call it, go ahead.
No, I was going to say for our listeners, we know that you guys met at KDHX, but no longer either one of you at KDHX. Is that correct?
No, no longer is anybody there that I know of.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just thought we'd
I,
catch up the folks who haven't heard.
well,
So
I left in a huff some years ago from my paid position, and then I left from my volunteer position unceremoniously dismissed after I silently protested the dismissal of the first volunteer and their little power trip over there. I mean, I can put it real quick and easy. KDHX has a board of directors gone bad. They were not looking at productivity of work for the last, 5 years since the pandemic. They realized that they could automate all programming and that they didn't need these pesky volunteers involved in decision making, and decided in a right to work state like Missouri is, the laborer has zero rights and the volunteer, the laborer, has even less. So the idea of the voting power of the associate membership was part of its structure to keep the license from ever being sold to a station like that, which is trying to buy the station now. That is a conglomerate out of state network that wants our FM transmitter that rightfully belongs here in the public's interest here in St. Louis, and organized by local interests. Where the problem lies is that somebody from outside of town found a really nice profit motive, and literally that's what I would say is what's going on. There is a profit motive involved in a nonprofit organization being taken over by a Christian station, because you can't tell me that a $4,000 or $4 million purchase is a thing that a nonprofit board would entertain ordinarily, when your bylaws state specifically that you should have the approval of both the volunteers and the members to avoid that very thing. That's how the bylaws were written, to avoid this thing that has been presented by the board of directors president, Gary Pearson. And he happens to be from Nashville, the same town where this, company K-Love came from, and he happens to be an intellectual property lawyer that's been involved in some pretty nasty stuff around town. So just any quick look up on Gary Pearson's background will show you this is not a person operating in the interests of this organization. So I
Yeah.
left a long time ago because I knew I couldn't do anything about it. I've been involved in a group called the Love of KDHX, which has been defending KDHX's legal situation, been continuing to petition and work towards making sure that those people are accountable for their wrong actions. So that's the group to work with. And look, if you want to know more information, you can write to the judge. If there's some more detail about it you want to know about, it's all here at the KDHX's Love of KDHX website, loveofkdhx.org. It's all very, very clear there, and there's a Substack, so it's regularly being published. What new thing is happening? It's being handled very, very well. So that's the place I could tell anybody to go figure that stuff out.
And the love of KDHX .org is the website, and the group you included is a group of volunteers that all felt
Yeah,
the same way, that
yeah,
not only is it funds being maybe misappropriated, power definitely being misappropriated. I mean, my understanding as a simpleton over here is that as a nonprofit set up as a community station, one of the things that is definitely not supposed to happen is for KDHX to go in debt to any religious entity, to any political entity. It is a community station. So, therefore, if there are outside powers, whether it be corporate, religious, political, all of these are things that you don't want impeding on a community station. You want it to be for the community, not for one of these other powers. And the company you brought up out of I think Tennessee, K-Love, who's trying to take it over. What a crazy name for somebody who obviously has no love, doing unscrupulous things to basically
misuse
steal
it.
a a transmitter license. My understanding is the current board actually went into debt to them for several
Yeah,
$100,000. That was illegal in the bylaws of. I mean, that was unscrupulous according to the way KDHX was set up. They weren't supposed to do that to begin with, right?
I think that the idea of getting into debt to them was actually from the bankruptcy court. And that is the big thing that Gary Pearson did that is really unheard of in nonprofit organizations is to declare bankruptcy without recognizing the restructuring that could have been done with regard to all of the financial situation. I mean, the community is ready to support this thing. That is to say, fundraise for legal battle is kind of hard, but to fundraise for the station in dire need of the support of the community, similar to the tornado relief. People will step up when there's a major disaster, and this is literally the major disaster. This is the thing that has been, infighting and how you run a nonprofit broadcast station is gonna be tricky. No matter anybody who's been involved in it knows how hard that is. And then to have a lot of volunteers be your principal, workforce, your labor force, for which you have very little hand. The power trip that became Kelly Wells' work and Gary Pearson's work is related to having a very difficult job. I hate to give them any empathy, but the reality is they're like, oh man, this is hard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just, get rid of those pesky volunteers because they make it harder, and let's get rid of, basically everything. They cut off all the limbs of the tree. I mean,
Yeah.
they cut every branch that wasn't controllable, that was, this little group that was handling this kind of thing for their niche audience, this kind of group that was handling this thing for their niche audience. These are the branches of this great, wonderful bush that is now a stump, that is, literally just dying for love, and unfortunately that's the name of this ridiculous conglomerate. It's the Antichrist coming, with regard to being a Christian station. It's really kind of ironic.
Well,
It's sort of the opposite with regard to its impact.
and
We don't need
that's
another Christian station in this market, right? I mean, how many are there? There's a dozen Christian stations, and there's nothing like KDHX, and that's unfortunate that it is so hard to manage. I'm just saying that from years of being behind the scenes. I know that it's difficult, and the power trip, I see why it happens. I see why they, decided this is too hard, but it's absolutely ridiculous. And that's just a step aside situation. There's others who do have the energy to do this correctly. And the other, there's all kinds of gaslighting going on with regard to the whys and the whats, and there's certain, everybody wants to point at what the big initial problem was, but no, the initial problem was that this is a very counterculture concept, and it will always be difficult to manage in a culture that really favors mainstream everything. You can't measure its impact with the tools that we have. That is to say, the whole Arbitron Nielsen rating thing, or how you sell advertising, or all of that system is built for a completely different level of everything. So
yeah.
being a nonprofit broadcaster with a license that becomes now worth 4 million potentially, when it's not about money. It should never have been about how many millions step to the table, but because that ass went to bankruptcy as his choice, as the leader of this organization, he goes to bankruptcy for a nonprofit, which again is pretty unheard of. So there's little, precedent in the courts to even look at in terms of when do you make what motion to make sure this doesn't happen or go through. The choice to make that decision wasn't his. The choice to put this license on the block wasn't his. It wasn't even that board of directors. It's the entire body, the voting members who were contributing, a class of people who were summarily dismissed. They changed the name. You're no longer a member. You're now a donor. They
Yeah.
got rid of the class of donorship so that voting body was no longer available.
Yeah.
They got rid of the voting membership called the associates, who were the volunteers, who were
Yeah.
workers. That was the other voting body of the three that were supposed to be able to make this kind of decision: go to bankruptcy, sell the license, any of those things. Like you said, the idea of going into debt for them was the choice of the judge to get creditors paid. That's the reason that the judge allowed that. They said, "Oh, you've got $150,000. We got debts amassing every month to the tune of 100,000. just to keep the building operating and Kelly in her salary.
Yeah, yeah, we could have got rid of the salary and alleviated most of that.
And
So,
insurance,
yeah,
the transmitter, the
yeah,
shack, the
yeah,
generator power is immense. I mean, so it's going into debt by it's going into this deeper debt and into the whole, here we are at the crossroads, and the devil is at the crossroads with us, giving us this golden ticket out. And I want to follow the money. I want to just see how much Gary as broker is getting on this. And that's my big conspiracy theory that I really have no evidence on. But that's the piece that just, I mean, Gary has never seemed to be operating in the interests of the organization or me for that matter. That is, I was a very, very, I was integral to the workings of it for a
oh
while. And
yeah,
I knew things that Kelly needed from me, which I documented and then made myself, irrelevant and left feeling good about having left because there was nothing else I could really impact.
yeah.
Knowing that I left in that way, and Gary Pearson didn't even have one word to say to me about it, didn't talk to me one time since I was there, didn't ask me about leaving, why I was leaving a productive career, walking away from a potential retirement situation, literally a 20-year career at a corporation that was becoming more and more legitimate with regard to the salaries, to be honest, and that was part of Kelly's big sell, was I'm making these jobs cooler. I'm making them more legitimate. We're
Right.
having professionals in these positions and if we want to be competitive, you ever want to get a better executive director than me, you better get that salary up higher. That's what we need to for me to step aside. You got to build a better position. That was what they kept saying, so I, yeah, it's so deep and rich and disgusting. Now, the reason that I'm here today is to tell you about
Yeah.
all the fun music
Yeah.
that we can think about in the next couple of days. Now, my name's Andy Coco. I got this company called Dogtown Records, and I publish records in an era when publishing is really, really also a counter mainstream. It's very difficult to to publish, or it's really easy to publish. So it makes it, not lucrative. But live performance is where it lives now for me. Live performance is really, really lots and lots of well, that's where the meaning comes from for me these days. So here, that is to say, the tonight's show is at Joe's Cafe, starting in just a few minutes. Joe's Cafe is in the DeBaliver neighborhood. I'm working with Big Mike Aguirre, a great blues player. We also have Matt Lesh on the show. Matt Lesh is an incredible young blues guitarist who's been traveling the world, spreading the gospel of St. Louis blues, along with Big Mike, who's been overseas for the last 5 years since the pandemic. He's been living in the islands, and now he's back with a vengeance. He's got family and grandkids in the scheme, so he's back and raging. So tonight is a intimate show at Joe's Cafe, which I'm super excited to be a part of. The Blue City All Stars is the name of the band. And then Friday or Saturday, on Saturday, I'm going to be at Grafton Winery. I'm coming up your
Yeah.
way, guys.
Yeah. Coming to my neck of the
Coming up.
woods.
I'm excited. I haven't been
Yeah.
up in a while, and I'm just always beautiful, always a wonderful. It's just so close and so far, But I just can't wait. I live in the center of the city. I live in Dogtown in the city, so it's just a matter of getting there. And man, when I do, I'm excited. I'm happy for it. So I've been excited to be invited to perform at Grafton Winery this Saturday. I'll be there at 3 o'clock through 7. It's my trio. It's soul jazz and funk kind of thing with Nathan Hershey on the keyboards, Jonathan Taylor on drums. So we'll be doing a bunch of soul and R&B and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
The Andy Coco Rhythm and Blues Review.
That's right.
It's Grafton Winery. I think that's 3 to 7, right?
Right.
3 to 7
Yep.
p.m. And that's this Saturday, just up the old river road there from us here in Alton and Grafton. My good buddy Andy coming back over to this side of the river to throw down some rhythm and blues. Hey, real quick though, before I want to ask about Dogtown. Um, if I
Forgive me.
Yeah, that's all right.
Go ahead.
if I remember right, me and you had a discussion as I first learned of the launching of Dogtown a while back, that we had this discussion about how uh, it, there was KDHX, there was all these venues, there were all these different aspects of music in St. Louis, but no real label uh, to speak of coming out of St. Louis. A few, people recording under different names and different studios and stuff. And that was what I was thinking, and I might have built it up in my head, but I felt like that's where you were trying to launch another stem of that music tree in St. Louis to have a more of a label out of St. Louis that is known for being a St. Louis label. It is you said you kind of live in the live music space now.
Yeah.
Are you still? I know you still got Dogtown. Are you still taking in new people on that, or is it still something that you're putting a lot of time into?
Well, I have a, maybe six-part answer to that question. I mean,
Excellent. Let's start with part one.
part one, label has a stigma. It's got a bad rep. It's bad, history of labels was, taking advantage of artists, utilizing their work and their, creation for their gain. And it's a big machine kind of system, the way that they would, create a talent, market that talent, build on that talent for the live performance, support touring, etc. So that whole concept of labels in the way that they had to do what they did, has always left a bad taste in my mouth, and it should, for anybody, that's ever heard the Tom Petty stories, or anybody who's ever heard the stories about all you had, Stevie Wonder fighting for his, due cash, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
The
that's
mo-
in
the the movie, The
absolute
Harder They Come.
direct.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
absolute
Sorry to interrupt.
direct. You're absolutely right. It's that same thing, and the idea of that's the system that we're opposing. That is in our benefit in a lot of ways. I mean, it's why we know who Stevie Wonder is because there was a hit machine for him to work within, and then go, wait a minute, I'm making all this money, but the machine gets most of it. And so he got to that point of being able to say, yeah, no, this isn't good anymore. I'm done with that. Now I'm good enough to be able to step and trailblaze for everybody else. And that's the problem now that we all know that that's a flawed model because that was exposed in such a way by many other artists over the years. I don't want to be a part of a label. I want to be a part of an imprint, And so I've used the word imprint as a kind of a changing what Dogtown Records is about from the standpoint of recording an event in time and going, that was worth recording. My favorite records, most of those that I think about when I think of classic rock radio, are these great epic live cuts from, like, Jackson Brown comes to mind right away, but there's a bunch of them. Santana, um, even early Journey was one of my favorite double albums I ever had. I mean,
Nice.
there's just all kinds of great live recordings, and so I've come to this understanding as a radio freak and as a person who conducted tons and tons of live and studio sessions, and have listened to hours upon hours of WWOZ broadcasting live from the Jazz Tent in New Orleans. That's kind of the direction that I want to go as a professional audio engineer. That's the place that I find my skills most aligned with my interests and taste. That's really some fun, special stuff when you get that. So I record a lot in order to just have the opportunity to maybe release something, get the data. If it was magic, then you've got it. Capture the lightning in the bottle by having a hell of a lot of bottles, right? Just put out as many bottles as you can. Okay,
Yeah.
that's my strategy, right? So I've been doing that. I've been doing audiobooks. I've got 3 audiobooks, full length, pieces. This wonderful series based in Cahokia. It's a wonderful concept. Alternate reality book, written by one of the founders of KDHX, in fact, Eric von Schroeder, the writer of this book, wrote this great trilogy adventure series called A Universe Less Traveled. And it's a world built. It's really neat. It's got all this cool technology from a alternate St. Louis that a guy can slip to and from, and then there's adventures and there's bad guys and trying to slip back and forth, and yeah, it's really really fun, and it really honors the Cahokian Mississippian culture of this area. It shows that importance in this alternate reality. It hasn't fully evolved like a very in fact, there's one of the anecdotes that I love about this is that the university on the grounds over at Monk's is called 10,000 Tribes University, and it researches all the Native American tribes, from north to south, and that's where they're studying, and they're all coming and they're migrating to and from there to study each other and their cultures and blah blah blah. So it's kind of badass in terms of a story as fiction. It kicks St. Louis in the ass a little bit. Here's some things you could do a little better. So I love being part of that audiobook series. It's really really great. But so I guess we were talking about Dogtown Records. I mean, that was one of the bigger projects I've done in the last few years. So the idea of recording more live music, recording people in my basement studio, it's not something I've expanded too much on because I've also been working at another radio station developing a concept there called Live in the Lou, Live from the Lou, oscillating on the name. I'm not sure which one it'll be, but this idea is a series of live recordings from venues in St. Louis, mostly soul jazz, live jazz, improvisational music, jazz, soul, R&B, funk. But it's on the classical station. So it
That's what I
sits
was
in
getting
this a
ready to
little
ask.
bit.
What's the dial? Where's it at on the dial?
It's at 107.3 FM.
107.3.
107.3 FM.
We're
It's
at
classic
107.
107.3.
We're at 107.1, so it's just a notch up from
Really
us
close,
right
yeah.
here.
And we're
That's
low
our.
power, so yeah, we're
I
not going to conflict. It doesn't go across the river, I don't think.
I can almost hear it from here. That's how close we are. I can almost hear
Yeah.
it. So, hey,
Well, I
real
enjoy
quick.
listening to it online. That's usually how I listen to it, just
Yeah.
because it is a low power situation. So
Now, I not to brush over that, but I'm going
yeah,
to
yeah.
forget the thought that's in my head here. I started
No, go
off
for it.
asking you about, or I didn't start off, but I started this little piece of conversation asking you about Dogtown and where it was going, and you said, "Oh well,
Yeah.
labels have a bad rap, and you're trying to sort of change that and a new attitude." And you discussed Stevie Wonder specifically there, and one of the thoughts that came to my mind is Dogtown recordings. Your idea behind it, like even when I saw it eventually, was to not be like the other labels, to be that next step in labels, sort of like, I mean, it's a weird thing, but back in the day they had the different circuits you could work. There was the Chitlin circuit that had to be broken, and it was broken. And Teddy Pendergrass, I believe, was one of the guys who helped, oddly enough, break out of it. But it was one of these situations where, you had this thing that was happening that people were able to do a little something, but they were getting nothing for it. They were getting pennies on the dollar, a straw penny for every show. And it took another circuit willing to take these artists and put them on a better circuit to break that. Uh,
Mm.
and I felt like that was sort of where you were looking at with Dogtown. Like back in the beginning when you first had discussed it with me, I thought, oh, he's trying to create a real label, not a here's $20 for your song. See ya,
Yeah.
label, you know.
Yeah.
And I wherever it lands, wherever the future, what it may be in that book, it already exists in another universe that it's doing great now. I don't, but wherever it is, the fact that it started off with a pure idea of trying to do better than the predecessors is really, I think, already a success. Just to shoot
Thanks.
to
Thanks.
make a difference in the way things are done, because as you said, so many artists were given $20 and told to go, thanks for the song, I got a
Yeah.
million. I'll see you.
Well,
So
well, the
I,
other
I applaud you on that effort.
Thanks.
So
Now, there's not a lot. There's not that I can give a whole lot though, and that's why I don't want to. I don't want to misrepresent the idea of why a label like there is a really really good one here in St. Louis that is doing so much more than what Dogtown Records is doing. It's called Blue Lotus,
oh
and
yeah.
Blue Lotus is Paul Niehouse's blues label, and a lot of his projects were funded by the Blues Society, in which case they were doing singles for musicians who couldn't afford full sessions and stuff like that. So if any, in terms of breaking the old model thing for me right now, I've been so much of my focus has been on performance and becoming a better musician and almost tabling this idea that we're discussing right now because
Okay.
what support I could give to other artists would be lacking. And that's to say that distribution is number one, right? That if we go back to the origination of this question, the conversation was labels in St. Louis didn't work when they could have or should have logistically. Why wouldn't the centerpiece of our country where everybody's coming through, all the traffic, all of the shipping, etc., why wouldn't this great center point have, you know, a the ability, even if it was a physical problem, most of this, we're talking about the day of vinyl, getting
Right.
to a radio station, physically getting to a radio station. So why wouldn't there ever be a manufacturing plant here? Why wouldn't we, and there was. We just never heard of them, because somebody didn't make the deal with somebody on the coast that would make that happen. Somebody did in Chicago. We've heard of Chess,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so they had deals with St. Louis artists. They had recording sessions here. They had other people sending that work up to Chess and that down to, I don't really know about the rest of the history, so I'd be, just baloney if I
Well,
said any more about it. But you understand the idea, though.
yeah,
For
you're at the
some
right place to
reason,
you're at the
yeah,
right
we're at the
place to
right
learn
place
some of
for it.
this history.
But
Yeah.
and we'll no longer need to be a physical center though with regard to this. That's no longer an issue, where it was impactful back then. It was hard to get it in their hands. Now it's so now we've got something else that's beautiful about St. Louis, and that's that center point means it's something to everyone and can be similar to my Cahokia thing. This is the center point of this great continent, and that's what makes our music great. You don't have a St. Louis place in a record store in Paris because it's so everything's different. Our music is so it's not singular, you got everything. There's
Yeah.
every style here. New Orleans has that going for them. You go to a New Orleans records, section in Paris or New York, and it's going to have a variety of music. You definitely see some traditional jazz. You'll see maybe some swamp pop if you're lucky, but it's going to have a wide variety of stuff. And
Yeah.
and that's what I think is really one of our great strengths here musically. And so if I was to able to do it all, I'd sing those praises and I'd work on, other people's records and all that. But right now I'm just having such a good time performing. So,
Well,
I'm
well,
happy that
let's
Mike's back because the band is banging. It's a really good blues band. I'm proud of working with him and the stuff that he's doing. Big Mike, he put a great thing online yesterday about the KDHX struggle. He did a very, very articulate statement, to the situation at KDHX. I'm proud of that for him. And just the show tonight is going to be fun at Joe's. And
yeah.
then, yeah,
So
come and see me at Grafton. I'm excited to be in Grafton on Saturday. It's 2 o'clock till 7. Nate Hershey is just an incredible talent on the keyboard. And John Taylor has his own projects and bands, and he's done a lot of composition work. And I've released a lot of his work under the name of Giant Quintet on Dogtown Records. His work is it's a recording project more than a performance thing, but it's man, such neat stuff. So
So
yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
what can we hear when we go see you in Grafton? Is it going to be cover music, original music? What do you got going on?
You're going to hear jazz interpretations. I think the idea that covers to me or tend to be, uh, uh, if you hear something that it's going to be it's going to be a take on it. We're not going to make it sound like the record ever. That's not the goal. We want to have put some breath into music that we didn't write a lot of times that you've not heard of. So that's my goal often is I'm not as good a composer as I am an interpreter and performer and recording engineer and all that. And so every time I try to write, it ends up being a like, no, I'd rather play that guy's song. We're gonna do that one instead. So I don't do a whole lot of original material myself. Mike's stuff, he does a lot of original material. Big Mike has really worked on that, particularly song crafting in the last few years that he's been away. So it'll be nice to see what kind of new stuff he comes up with too. But so we're probably doing about half and half today. Matt Lesh on the show. We're doing a couple of his originals. We're doing a couple of Big Mike's originals today. And on Saturday in Afton, I think we'll probably have mostly New Orleans style R&B, piano driven. I'm really into Alan Toussaint as a
I was thinking that. I'm
so I
going
do a lot
Alan
of Alan
Toussaint,
Toussaint
man.
songs. Yeah, I like to do a lot of his songs. Those are the things that I really like to sing,
Yeah,
as a vocalist.
you can be into music really heavy and still miss things. Things just go kind of right over your head. And I'll be honest, never been a big Robert Palmer fan. Bad Case of Loving You, Addicted to Love. Not my jams necessarily. I've only in the past couple years come across his first albums with Alan Toussaint and Lowell George. And I'm like, that is so good. Why wasn't that on the radio? you know, because
Yeah.
that Alan Toussaint, pretty much anything he touches is gold. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of New Orleans, the New Orleans scene. But the mixture of Alan and Lowell George is just it makes me giddy. I get titillated by that.
I'm a, I'm always excited to tell people that the Sneak and Sally band was the Meters. That's that's who
Oh
that is in that
yeah,
Alan Toussaint session. That whole record is
yeah.
so good.
Anything by the meters. I mean, like I haven't heard. The last time I saw one of the Neville's live was the Dumpster Funk. And again, I
Oh
mean, it
yeah, yeah,
doesn't matter what they do. It
so
doesn't
good.
matter which direction they take it. I sit in awe and go, "That was so good." you know,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I
We had a
love that.
really special one. Yeah, the Dumpster Funk with George Porter at Music at the
Yeah,
Intersection last year. Is that what you're
and it
talking about?
had one of the
Yeah, it was
Neville's,
fantastic.
two of them actually, one of the
Oh yeah,
grandsons and
yeah,
one of the original. So
yeah,
it was
yeah.
just a hodgepodge of some New Orleans style players that I was lucky enough to catch a couple times out and about. And man, always puts a smile on my
That was
face.
so special because it's like, those are the guys, those are literally the children of the Meters.
Oh yeah,
And the one bass player passed away just recently, Nick Daniels. So you saw one of the last really special,
yeah,
family affair Meters jams that day.
yeah.
That was a good one. That was a really good show.
Well, and
It's a
like you
good
say,
memory.
anything. What is that? Porter, Batiste, and Stoltz. I mean, like in any of
Yeah.
any of
Yeah.
those combinations, just make me go a little goosebumps right now just saying it. Such good stuff. Hey man, it's so great to talk to you and see you again, buddy. I mean, it
Same,
has been a
same.
while
Yeah, thanks
since
for
I've gazed upon your uh, face here.
Thanks for
Uh,
reaching out, Sean. I appreciate it.
yeah,
It's nice to see you both. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
So it's the Andy Coco review tonight at Joe's. What time is that going down? It's kicking off
It's
any
at
minute now.
I think, yeah, it's gee whiz. I got to get to the stage.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, it's time for you to get going there, my friend. Uh,
I'm supposed to be on the stage in just a few minutes. No,
uh,
doors are at 7 and shows at 8. So